Welcome to the Caribbean, historians. Whoa, okay, slow down. One at a time. What? Why are we here? Weren't we just in Europe? I thought we were talking about kings and revolution and okay. Maybe we need a little context, huh? First things first. We're here in the Caribbean because all those kings in European countries we've talked about had overseas colonies, both here and more broadly in this area we call Latin America. Latin America is a large portion of Central and South America, along with the Caribbean, which are bound together by Spanish and Portuguese culture. And why, do you ask, are they connected by Spanish and Portuguese culture? Well, that's why we're here. Revolution in North America and France had the exact ripple effects that the crowned heads of Europe were afraid of. And today, we highlight a pretty special one: Haiti. There's no better place to begin a discussion of Latin America than the place where it started, the island of Hispaniola. Christopher Columbus bumped into this island during his famous, or infamous, 1492 voyage and set this whole area on a completely different and complicated path. For our guiding questions, let's start right there. What was the impact of European colonization on Haiti? For a little foreshadowing, what prompted a slave revolt in Haiti? Who was Toussaint Louverture and what were his contributions to the Haitian Revolution? What was Napoleon's reaction to the Haitian Revolution? And our big picture question, are revolutions always marked by violence? When he reached Hispaniola, Columbus came upon the native inhabitants, the Taino people. The Taino had a highly developed society and an extensive trade network with Central America. None of that interested Columbus, but their body ornamentations made of gold did. In his pursuit of the shiny metal's origin, Columbus forced many of them into slavery, attempting to mine for the gold that wasn't actually there. Remember the trade network I mentioned? Not much value was found, but as most of us know, the spread of European disease led to the death of perhaps 95% of the 8 million Taino, arguably the worst case of depopulation in the Americas, labeled as genocide by many historians. Having lost the native enslaved labor force, other Spanish governors began importing African slaves by the tens of thousands. In fact, by the time the French received the western third of the island via treaty with Spain in 1625, an estimated 600,000 Africans, mainly of West and Central African origin, had been transported to the island. Due to the climate and the nearly unlimited supply of forced labor, Haiti became one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest, overseas colonies in the world, sending an enormous fortune back to France. And that's not all. 40% of all sugar and 60% of all coffee, remember our Enlightenment salons and coffee houses, imported into Europe came from Haiti. Let's revisit our first question. What was the impact of European colonization on Haiti? Create an answer in your lesson guide. When we see the term slave revolt, it usually doesn't bring up a bunch of positive imagery, does it? Slaves are generally depicted as faceless and without individuality, often because those talking about slaves were the ones who also owned them. The story of Haiti's slave revolt is embedded within the many identities of the Haitian people and the emergence of their own rich cultural heritage over centuries of enslavement. So, who were they? The first slaves were brought to Hispaniola in 1502, primarily from the current countries of Benin, Togo, Nigeria, and Ghana. Now, while the names of these countries may be known, many, if not all, of the people brought would not have thought of themselves that way at all. Those who were brought against their will thought of themselves as Ewe, Fon, and Aja, or their tribal names. These tribes brought a rich cultural complex, such as their languages, their religion, and their entire way of looking at life. Merging with other traditions, including the culture of Saint-Domingue, the French third of the island, their language became Haitian Creole. Their religion syncretized into voodoo, and their way of looking at life bound them together, creating a unique Saint-Domingue culture, albeit under the repression of slavery. Speaking of slavery, many in the Americas regarded the Saint-Domingue slave situation as the most brutal in the world. Even with a code noir, or slave law code, meant to soften treatment of slaves, beatings, burnings, and mutilations were common. It's estimated that perhaps 1 million enslaved people died from mistreatment in Saint-Domingue over the roughly 100-year history of the French colony. This brutality, combined with the strict class system we mentioned when talking about Napoleon's empire, the affranchis, or former slaves, free blacks, and mulattoes would never equal the same societal status as even the petits blancs, or common whites. And even in Saint-Domingue, the Enlightenment ideas of freedom, individual liberty, and equality were present. This, combined with all our other factors, led over 100,000 slaves, or 1/5 of the total slave population, to rise in revolt in 1791. Let's return to our essential question. What conditions prompted a slave revolt in Haiti? Craft an answer in your lesson guide. As with the French Revolution, the uprising on Saint-Domingue wasn't exactly planned, and chaos erupted as former slaves, with hundreds of years of repression in their minds, destroyed plantations and targeted those of French and mixed ancestry. Enter Toussaint Louverture. Born a slave in Saint-Domingue in 1743, he was freed before the Revolution, but joined the popular uprising in 1793 due to the Republican government in France abolishing slavery in all its territories. Louverture eventually became lieutenant governor and, through his military and political leadership, took control of the entire island of Hispaniola in 1798. A goal of Louverture's was to restore stability on the island, particularly to the economy, which had stalled because plantations don't really work without slavery. But plantations were what they had, and so Louverture got the system working again, this time with paid labor. He found money by making trade deals with the United States, the United Kingdom, and even France, which Louverture and Saint-Domingue didn't officially break away from until he had used his own army and political influence to get rid of all opposition to his rule in Saint-Domingue and dictated a new constitution in 1801, which declared him Governor General for life with almost unlimited authority.
Now wait just a doggone minute.
I hear you saying, wait, another dictator? What gives? That's a good question. So head to your lesson guide and speculate on why this happened in a revolution yet again. Now, revisit our essential question. Who was Toussaint Louverture and what were his contributions to the Haitian Revolution? If there's one thing a dictator doesn't like, it's another dictator. Napoleon, firmly in control of much of Europe by this point in time, was not amused. Under General Charles Leclerc, 23,000 French troops invaded Saint-Domingue with the express mission of reasserting French control. Not only for Napoleon's irritation, but for the incredible wealth produced in Saint-Domingue, the French were determined, in spite of suffering massive losses due to tropical disease, to press on. Knowing the French difficulties with the landscape, and also weakened by an active revolt against his rule, Louverture accepted a parley request from the French. His goals were to negotiate a peace and guarantee the continued abolition of slavery. Instead, on June 7th, Louverture was captured, accused of inciting an uprising, and deported to France, where he died in prison on April 7th, 1803. Let's revisit our final guiding question. What was Napoleon's reaction to the Haitian Revolution? After Napoleon declared his intentions to reintroduce slavery to the island, Louverture's lieutenant, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, declared independence from France January 1st, 1804, and eventually pushed the French military out. Now, the free country of Haiti, this 13-year fight marked the first successful slave revolt in world history. As we wrap up and you begin to think about our big picture question, be mindful of how this revolution or liberation occurred, because we're off to more liberation across Latin America. Why? Because history is everywhere.
Hey.